hours, it's 3 o'clock for regular folks. We'd like to call this meeting to order, as Commissioner Gardner, if he would lead us in the invocation, and Commissioner Ray, if he would lead us in the pledge to the flag. Join us, please. Proposed alternative. William, would you like
Yes,
to
ma'am.
go over that?
Madam Chairman, you will find in the notice agenda packet and the information that I sent you, there is a spreadsheet that details 20 different alternatives. The first column that I gave you was the original recommendation with no longevity and no funding of detention officers. That, without a tax increase, calls for furlough days of 14.25 or a reduction in salary of 5.481.
Excuse me, William.
Yes.
Does anybody in the audience have access to this spreadsheet? Is it any way to put it up?
It's on notice agenda. I don't know if they have any electronic means, but we could,
No, but I'm saying we don't have a way okay.
I can make some, I think he'll make some copies real quick.
Does anybody want a copy? Okay, they're not interested in it, that's good.
Okay. You had, the board had asked to consider alternatives to include quarter meal, half meal, three-quarter meal, and 1 meal tax increase. Those alternatives are given for each of the scenarios here. If you kept the recommended budget as is, without funding the 15 positions as was recommended, if you had a 1 meal tax increase, there would be 0 furlough days, and there would be $112,000 actual surplus. The next column over funds the 4 detention officers, given the same scenarios. With a full 1 meal tax increase, you're still looking at 3/4 of a furlough day, or 0.292% pay reduction. The third column over is 100% longevity funded with the 4 detention officers. If you go all the way down to the 1 meal increase, it still calls for 4.94 days of furlough. If you go to 50% longevity, the lowest furlough days again is with the 1 meal increase, 2.85. And these are the estimates that we were able to get to you in a short time basis. Since this time, we have had estimates from the City of Griffin for payments of past years. On your agenda tonight, you will have a letter authorizing a letter to the City of Griffin asking for reimbursement for 800 megahertz fees for fiscal years 2011, 2012, and estimated 2013, with an intergovernmental agreement to approve for fiscal year 14 forward. Should the City of Griffin remit fiscal year 11 and 12 fees, that's about $160,000. That is not taken into account with any of these estimates. Should they also pay fiscal year 13, that is roughly $105,000. That is budgeted in the current year's budget. So we would that would go against the revenue shortfall that we would have this year. And we do have approximately $100,000 budgeted in fiscal year 14 budget that is included in all these alternatives that you have here. Is that?
The one thing, and this may be my fault, is that I didn't think to ask for is, with any of these scenarios, you show where there will be actually $112,999 in fund balance with the first option. But we didn't really take into account that if there were to have to be a millage rate, part of I think our goal should be to increase the fund balance, not just make sure that we don't have to add furlough days or nobody loses their job, because we are at a deficit in our fund balance. And I mean, what good is if the millage rate has to get increased if the fund balance isn't built up? I know we didn't ask you for that, but, I mean, that certainly should be, I would think that that would be, needs to be a consideration.
Well, then, if, say you wanted a $250,000 for fund balance, roughly $350,000 to increase fund balance, you could either add a $250,000 or go back and readjust these numbers with the furlough days. We could do that, but as you said, I did not consider that alternative.
May I ask another question, William? What, in terms of days, what would a $250,000 do for the fund balance? As far as giving us time, operating expense time?
$250,000 is roughly $350,000. Ms. Garrison, how much is that in a day? Less than a day?
About $2.5 million a month.
So it is about $70,000 per day. So 305 a week.
And we're at what now, 5 weeks, 4 weeks? We're at 6 weeks?
These figures also do not include, there was talk between Tuesday and Friday about reducing the long-term disability benefit. That is roughly $94,000 for all funds. That is not calculated in these calculations. When I sent out the email on that, there were 2 commissioners in favor of doing that. That's the only responses that I got back on that. Mr. Miller, I did find out just about 10 minutes ago that the Development Authority contracts for the grass cutting at the lakes at Green Valley, Hudson Industrial Park, and Green Valley Industrial Park are 2-year contracts. They were signed in fiscal year 13, so they will cover fiscal years 13 and 14. Jake did meet with Brian Upson and David Lucky at the industrial parks earlier this afternoon. And Jake proposes that it would not adversely affect the grass cutting crews if when they were in that area every other round, which is probably going to be about every 9 to 12 weeks, that they cut the flat portions of the industrial park at no charge because excuse me, the Development Authority does not have a contract on the flat portions. They've got contracts on the slopes and then contracts on the right-of-way in Green Valley and Hudson Industrial Parks where they actually mow that like someone would their yard. So
Well,
those
what
are
does he
2-year
pay to
contracts.
do the flat spots then? If he contract, we're not cutting it, he's paying somebody to cut the flat spots.
We were doing it on and off as needed over the past few years until last year when there were some talks of having the Industrial Authority pay us for cutting the flat portions. We were using it as training areas for our inmates because the inmates that we have now haven't seen many tractors in their life, much less drive one. So those huge flat areas make good training areas for our inmates to keep them from cutting down telephone poles and fire hydrants and guide wires.
So we were paying $130-something thousand just for the slopes and stuff, that didn't include the flat spots.
That's just the Development Authority, yes.
Yes.
And that's the other right-of-ways as well for Hudson Industrial Park and Green Valley Industrial Park. They take care of all 3.
And how many times did you say that they actually paid us when we had some concerns about cutting that? They
Last
paid-
year, I think it was 3 times,
And that was about $500 each time, you said?
about $600 for fuel.
That's per year.
No, that was for per event.
3 times, that'd be about 18.
3 times a year, about $1,800, $2,000.
So they reimbursed us for the fuel, but we still allowed our crews to.
Right. It takes about 3 or 4 days to cut all the flat areas,
Around both parks.
both parks. that are owned by the development authority. The vacant areas, not where the businesses are located. Another thing that was brought up was, motor pool.
But before you go there,
Okay,
let's get some kind of consensus about this thing about the development authority, so we
Okay.
can nail some of this
yes,
stuff
ma'am,
down.
that'd be great.
Where is everybody? Raymond?
I mean, what are we asking?
The development authority is asking that we cut the flats for them, about every 12 weeks when our crews are in that area.
When we can work it out with our crews and it will not adversely affect the mowing.
I don't have a problem with that because I'd rather the CI, the prisoners cut the grass, get used to being on the lawnmowers and cut it and training out there versus taking down guide wires on telephone poles, signage and beating up our equipment on right-of-way items, such as signs, poles, guide wires, those kind of things.
What,
I have seen where we have done that quite a bit in the last 3 years.
what about the reimbursement for the fuel?
I think reimbursement for the fuel will be fine.
Okay. What about you, Rachel?
We be reimbursed for it.
Okay, but you're okay with us cutting them flats every 12 weeks or so when we cycle through there? What about you, Chipper?
I'm good with it.
What about you, Bart?
I am too.
Okay, so
Reimbursement.
nail that down.
Yes, ma'am. I've got that one nailed down. You want to move on to
Whatever.
long-term disability or?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, that's the two easier ones.
Um,
Long-term disability is approximately $94,000 a year in cost for all funds. It has been 100% provided by the county for the past several years. We are in the middle of signing up for open enrollment right now, but we can modify that and drop that coverage out and have it provided to our employees on an individual basis. It will be significantly higher on an individual basis than it is on a county basis, because when the county pays for it, everybody's covered. The young ones, the old ones, the sick ones, the non-sick ones, the, et cetera, et cetera. So the rates are different for group than they are for individual. I think the only requirement they have is that 25% sign up for it. And that may be for them to even offer it individually, and that may be a problem. I don't know, can't tell you.
My thoughts on this is that I was one of the first people that said we should drop the long-term disability when we talked about insurance. If we provide short-term disability, I think if someone feels like they're gonna be out longer than that, then they should be willing to pay for that coverage. I think that this long-term disability coverage equates to one furlough day less. That's the way I look at it. So I'm for dropping the long-term disability in exchange for dropping a furlough day. What about you, Frank? Where do you stand?
Do we have a cost between what we are looking at paying versus what we would pay if we, cafeteria plan?
I do, and it will have to be paid for after taxes. It is not, when you pay for it before taxes, it becomes taxable, and there are many other tax consequences. Hold on just a second. Right now, I think we're paying, I have amidst all these memos, some cost. All right, the renewal rate is 51 cents per $100 irrespective of age. The voluntary rates are age graded and range from 16 cents to $1.72 per 100 of salary. So, right now, the county pays 51 regardless of your age. Depending on your age, if you're young, it can be as low as 16. If you're my age or older, it's probably $1.72 per 100 of salary. But we don't have individual rates, and as he said, that will base on
That is $100 or 100,000?
per $100 of salary, annual salary. And that is per month.
Because it replaces your salary, right?
Right. The average salary, say, is 36,000, divided by 100 is 3,600. Excuse me, it's 360 times the $1.72 is about $62 a month for the average at the high end, at the William O. Geezer rate.
That's $62 per employee, I mean,
Per month for the average county employee.
Based on that, I would prefer that we research this more and look at it more seriously for the next budget cycle versus pulling it out from underneath our employees right now when we've already started the process of benefits and elections up. So my vote is against it this year.
Rita?
The 20, you mentioned you have to have 25% opted in?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know what the what's the probability of that, should I say?
I mean, that just, the question is.
That'd
you
be
get the long-
125 people.
Yeah, you get the long-term disability, everybody gets it if we pay for it, but how important is it to you if you don't have it, do you need it?
Well, I'm thinking that the furlough date, I mean, I'm a current leader of insurance, of course, but I'm thinking the furlough days are more important at this point. So I was also one of the ones that suggested that we know the long-term disability. That's the way to go. Amending that.
Okay, Chipper?
I don't know, I just had this fear of last minute when something's in process and making changes and everything like that. I think this is something that we can try to look at and plan for our next fiscal year, instead of making a decision that we may regret if we made 3 months from now. So I think we'll leave it right now and look at next year.
Bart?
I think we need to look at other decreases. There's some places I think we need to try to find some other places that's over budgeted. I know it's none of our departments, it's places like the Development Authority that's asking for all this money. We need to take what we're gonna take away from them before we make a decision here, in my opinion. I'm 94,000, it's not for a day furlough. I mean, for everybody. I think we said it was $90,000 for one furlough day, so, I think before I make a decision on this, I'd like to see if we can find someplace else we can, take some big dollars from instead of fooling around with $90,000.
Okay, so that's 2, and I'm not sure where I am.
So what other, Commissioner Miller, what big places are you talking about? The Development Authority requested 500 and some odd thousand dollars. We recommended only $100,000. We didn't recommend the full, so there's.
We didn't put in there everything.
I get the impression you thought we recommended the 500,000. We did
No,
not.
I know they asked for it.
They asked for
I
it.
saw 500,000 in one of these write-up things in here.
You saw it under the requested column, but under the recommended column, we only recommended 100,000, so, I'm just.
Yeah, is there anywhere else, I mean, unless you're thinking that we shouldn't fund the Development Authority? Is that what you're thinking?
If they've got money to operate on this year, I don't know whether we need to fund them or not. I mean, $100,000 is $100,000.
How many years have they funded in lieu of us assisting them with funding?
I
3,
believe
4.
it's the last 4, if not the last 5. I know it's the last 4.
And did we fund them at all last year?
We originally started at 100,000, but due to the tax shortfall, we cut it to 50,000. Back when we, in November, when we set the millage rate. Or December.
The Development Authority much like the county has these last several years, has been living off of their reserves, and they have, much like we have spent their reserves down, so, I just say that as a point of reference.
They did have a large expenditure recently, Commissioner Gardner, was for the $1 million for the,
Incubator.
Incubator program.
so they did draw that down their fund balance considerably in the last 30 days.
How much money they got on hand?
Yeah. Jenna's gonna go get their audit from last year.
You know, I'm not sure what they have on hand, but I really don't think that it's unreasonable that there's a funding recommendation for $100,000. I know at least 4 years that I sat on this board that we didn't give them a penny. And, just like everybody else, I know that they had to use money from somewhere. You know, but, you know, you're still technically speaking.
And they have prospects that come in at different times during the year, and there has to be funds expended when those prospects come to visit and stuff like that. I mean, if it's a serious prospect and they're trying to attract jobs and industry to this community, and, I mean, there's several things that they have going on in trying to attract industry here, and those things cause them to use a little bit of money during the year.
I think when he was here, I think he mentioned two industries, right? He said that in particular, so.
We have
mentioned
some
two of them.
prospects.
Raymond?
The Development Authority oversees the properties that were paid for through SPLOSH, the 2005 and 2008, which is in excess of what, William, $30 million for those two SPLOSH? And doing that, one industrial cycle has almost been filled. So now we have the Green Valley at the lakes. And doing that, we're asking them to go in there, and it's like asking the sheriff's department and any other department out here in front of us saying, well, here's your money, you've been tasked by the county residents to do this, but we're not gonna give you any funds to facilitate your business. So I think $100,000, even though it's not the 584 that they asked for, I think 100,000 is reasonable, which we can always go back and do based on what is availability. We can add or decrease later.
I just want to clear one thing up that you said, Commissioner Wright. That property is not overseen by the Development Authority. That property belongs to the Development Authority. It is not the property is not the county's property. So when they sell a piece of property, or they profit from it, or they do whatever, those monies go back into their coffer to reinvest. So
For the properties.
Yeah, for the properties.
The incomes and the sales taxes and the retail taxes and all that come to the county by them bringing in new businesses and employees, and that's.
Right, but I mean, when you said they oversee the properties for the county, I just wanted to make it clear that everybody understands that they don't oversee those for us. They are their properties. So Bart, where are you? Did you find someplace else that we might be able to pull some money from somewhere that's a big number?
Well, I've talked to some county employees and other stuff. I don't know, I'm torn between furlough days and decrease in pay and stuff like that. You know, some people it affect different ways than it does others. My thing is, you know, if I'm gonna ask the employees to take a cut in pay, I think everybody that works for the county should take a cut in pay. That includes me, elected officials. You know, it doesn't make any difference one way or the other. You know, it'd be based out over a 12-month period for people that are exempt more or less from it. I don't think there should be anybody exempt. I don't know why. I don't understand this process of these people that are exempt. Are you saying that, you know, how do they get furlough days, or how do you take pay from them? The only way I think you take pay from them, you know. And I don't know if that's the best way. I do care about the employees, but, you know, taxpayers in 2009-10 had raised in property taxes. You know, every time it's turned around, the taxpayers end up having to pick up the loose end because there wasn't enough money. But, you know, it's got to stop sometime though. My daughter's a school teacher. She had to take 10 days last year. She's having to take work longer days, they did away with furlough day, but they're putting in more time now, which they're not getting paid for, but it's still there, the furlough days. There's not any way that you can't sit here and say that, you know, we can't take furlough days or a cut in pay. But I think if it's done, it should be on a county-wide basis of every county employee.
Well, I'm not far from agreeing with you about that, except for constitutional officers' salaries are determined by the state. And you know, that constitutional officer does not have to elect to take a pay cut. You can elect to take a pay cut, but you don't have to. So that, I mean, you know, when you say across the board, it does not affect, it only affects employees that are not constitutional officers.
You send them a letter, they've got to agree to take it out. I mean, if they ask,
They don't have to agree to take it out.
I know, but if they agree, if you send them a letter, would you agree to take, would it be 4% salary cut in your pay? Would you be willing to do that to cut some of these furlough days off of employees? You know, you can do that. I mean, if they say they would do it, I mean, I'd have to sign something, in my opinion, I'd have to sign it. If I had to want to take 5% out of my paycheck to do it, I would have to sign something to guarantee that I'd give it up back over the next 12 months. Wouldn't I? I mean,
You have
There are
to-
different administrative ways to handle it. That all has yet to be worked out. It is a little bit different with constitutional officers and elected officials, but
I mean,
I've
basically,
worked with all these folks for years, and I think if the county commissioners asked them that they would work with the board in any way in which they could. But it is a very different administrative way of doing it, rather than just say, those who come under the personnel policies, all you would do is adjust the pay scale, boom, down 4%, it's over. You know, nobody has to sign anything. The other officers, we would have to work with individually with their departments.
okay, anybody else got anything else on this? So,
But the question on long-term disability is still 2-2,
right, we don't have a decision on that.
okay? Development Authority, what I have written down is that Commissioner Ray, Commissioner Flowers Taylor, and Commissioner Gardner are in favor of the $100,000 for Development Authority, leaving it in the budget. Is that okay? And Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
So that's 4, okay? Those are the easier items to deal with today. As I mentioned,
Let me just ask you a question, just a consensus on this board. If we end up having to do some kind of across-the-board pay cut, where does everybody stand on taking an equal percentage of pay cut from their constitutional salary?
I'm good with it.
I would go with it.
You talking about the elected officials?
from commissioner salaries,
Taking a cut, if there is a cut in salary for all the employees, would you be willing to take an equal cut in your?
Most definitely.
Okay, so that's unanimous.
that's fine.
Okay, so if that has to be an option, then this board is in agreement with that. Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay. Again, one item that was mentioned was the pension contribution. I have gotten opinions from both the auditor, GovCorp, and ACCG that essentially says we should make the pension contribution, the required pension contribution. There are some things that will happen if we do not, that would adversely affect the county monetarily, particularly when the state withholds funds. Right now, we get monthly funds from the state for the inmates at the correctional institution. That's about $2.7 million a year. We get monthly funds from the state on SPLOST and LOST. We get monthly funds from the state for CSBG. And what else, Ms. Garrison? So that could negatively affect our cash flow tremendously should we not make that pension contribution. And,
LMIG grants.
I'm sorry, yes, LMIG for Department of Transportation. So it's a very big stick they carry if we don't make that required contribution. Can I get it'll be okay to, you get a consensus on that?
Consensus?
I say we make the contribution.
I agree.
Make a contribution.
I agree too.
Okay.
Okay? All right.
Question, does making that contribution have anything to do with the 1% that we add to our, that we put in our, what is it, our retirement? Is that contribution separate from that or equal from that? That's the defined benefits contribution, right?
It is our DB, DC combination. It's all of our pensions are rolled into one. They're actually three, the old one, the 5 or 6 year old one, and the current one.
Okay, well, what I'm saying is that you say that right now, we invest 4% into the pension
We
plan.
pay 4% of employees' base, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so how does that affect what our, estimated cost, annual cost of pension plan is? I mean, are you saying that we can't ever decide that we don't want to invest in a pension plan? You don't understand what I'm saying,
No,
right?
ma'am. We cut out the match.
Mhm.
That's just done administratively. That is subject to funding. This is a requirement for all of our pensions together to fund the minimum to keep them going. It's the old defined benefit plan, the old defined contribution plan, and the new combination of both, which has a 1% DB and then a 401A match. So it's all those, they don't send us a bill for each separate plan.
No,
It's
but
all jumbled together.
when you say the 1%, what is that? Tell me that again.
Right now, the current pension is 1% we put in for every employee with a maximum of 30 years, and you get 1% per year. So you get 30 years of your salary at pension time. Then we had a match on top of that we would put in an additional 4% if you put in 8% deferred compensation. That's the current plan, correct?
Current plan is a 1% defined benefit,
The match.
and the match if you contribute to the 14%.
The plan before that was a 4% defined contribution plan where we put in 4% would match up to 8%, but there was no defined benefit plan in that plan. We went from a defined benefit plan, old plan, to a strictly defined contribution plan, to now what is called a hybrid plan. It's very confusing.
No, I'm not confused. You're saying that we have an election plan and we still have a defined benefits plan because we're gonna pay up to 4% into your pension plan regardless annually.
4% is those who stayed in the middle plan, which was defined contribution. We had several stay in that plan, plus we have several that are still in the old frozen plan. Both those plans are frozen, but if you come to us today as a brand-new employee, we will pay 1% per year of your salary for a defined benefit, and then up to 4% when we reinstate the match. Up to 4% if you put 8% in deferred comp.
Okay, so my question is this. Why do we have to do that? I mean, our policy is now that we will pay 1% up to 30 years. That's our pension plan without them matching anything.
Correct.
That's a policy decision. I mean, there's no law that says we have to provide a pension. We have to pay for what we already have in place. Am I correct?
We have to pay for what we already have in place, and we have a signed trustees agreement that says we will do that.
we will pay for what's in place?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but we don't have a requirement that we have to provide a pension, starting from day one. That's what I'm trying to get you to explain to me. And you know what, you don't have to explain it to me today, because I'm in agreement for paying, for
Okay.
funding. I just think it needs to be something that we need to look at, 'cause I understand that we're on a timeline, and certainly I don't want to.
No, technically, we don't have to pay a pension, but we have a program in place that is adopted by the board that says we will provide one.
Mhm.
If
That's
we
what I'm
want to
saying.
discontinue that, we can freeze that one and say from here out, no pension plan will be provided for the county. Yes, ma'am, we can do that.
Okay, so we're all in agreement that we will make our pension plans this year so that we can make sure we guarantee no repercussions from the state and that the program stays intact. Next item.
Okay. The chart, the spreadsheet that I gave you, some commissioners had asked how many folks are affected by longevity, and there was a second attachment to Nova's agenda, which told you that given the current 10-year, 15, 20-year plan for longevity, there was a total, let's see, yeah, we're 110, 237 employees out of 550 received longevity. 110 get 10 years, or have been here 10 years or longer. 48 have been here 15 years or longer, and 79 have been here 20 years or longer. That chart also displays the average salary of a county employee of $35,935, the 14 furlough days, or the 5.384% furlough, is $1,935 taken from their pay. That's 5.38% for someone who did not qualify for longevity. For someone who had 10 years longevity, that is 9.18% salary reduction. For someone who had been here 15 years, it was 10.37% salary reduction. And someone who had been here 20 years or longer, it was 11.54% reduction in salary. I included the current holidays with your handout, so you could look at possible furlough days should you wish to do that. I also included information from Bill Gay, I believe is what Commissioner Miller was discussing, was furlough days for exempt employees. And there's a copy of the National Register here that goes into all this federal mumbo jumbo, but essentially when you're an exempt employee like Jenna or myself or a department head, when you have a furlough day during that week, that position loses its exempt qualification. And should that employee work more than 32 hours that week, that employee, by the official interpretation of the Fair Labor Standards Act, would be owed overtime for that anytime they worked over 32 hours
During a furlough day.
during the furlough week. That, I disagree with it, but that is the law.
How much trouble is it gonna be to keep for some department heads to keep up to make sure that they don't end up with those overtime hours?
That, among other reasons that I cited here, is the reason that I am recommending, not necessarily Jenna now, so this is where you're out there on a limb. I am recommending the across-the-board salary decreases in lieu of furlough days. Because you have, as you saw the letter from the judges in the Griffin Judicial Circuit, elected officials not electing to participate, I don't think any of ours were, but they have that right. Unanticipated overtime expenditures from the possible areas in public safety that must be staffed. I believe at the jail, there are 13 positions that must be staffed 24/7, 365. And if Joe Blow correctional officer is supposed to be out on furlough that day, and the one who's supposed to relieve him calls in sick, they're gonna pull somebody for overtime to cover that position. They have no choice.
But they're gonna do that anyway, if somebody calls out, right? I mean, whether it's a furlough day or a regular day, if somebody doesn't come in and they're supposed to work, they're gonna have to call somebody.
They're gonna figure out a way to put somebody in that position, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But I think the better way to do this is an across-the-board salary decrease. It would affect everyone the same way. It would not adversely affect employees. Say you gave Christmas, if you did all 10 holidays plus 4 furlough days, the 10 holidays and Thanksgiving, you're gonna be short that 2 week of pay, 2 days of pay. Right there before Christmas, that hurts pretty bad. And Christmas, this year, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day are Tuesday, Wednesday. You get paid for those at the end of the month. You're gonna be shorted 2 days. Then the next check you'll be shorted January 1st and MLK Day, and it'll be shorted 2 days. So those 1, 2, 3, 4 checks, you'll be shorted 2 days each, 3 out of those 4 checks. And that's gonna be hard to cope with at Christmas time. That's why I'm recommending an across-the-board salary decrease. I know a lot of folks don't like that because they feel that the county commission, once something is taken away, that the board will never give it back.
Can we write that up, though, that effective June the 30th of 2014, that, I know they already done told me it's a COLA, you go back into a COLA thing, that they would have, it'd be a COLA raise if you did that.
Or you could just reinstate salaries to the fiscal year 2013 level, and this board would still be in office July 1st, 2014. That is an election year. So in 2015, part of that fiscal year would not be stands a chance of some people on this board sitting here today not being here then. But I would think that should this board do that, they would come out with a statement to assure county employees, or I would recommend they come out with a statement to ensure county employees that their salaries will be reinstated to fiscal year 13 salaries. Y'all don't throw something at me. Given sufficient revenues to make that happen.
Well, see, that's what I'm saying, that's no guarantee at all. I mean, you can't hang your hat on that. That's my only concern.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean,
There's
and I
no
feel,
easy-
yeah, there's no easy answer, and I feel like it will be easy, it's obviously gonna be very easy to sit here this time next year and say, well, we took away da-da-da-da-da-da, and, now we need to figure out if we're gonna be able to reinstate that. But if it's looking as ugly as it is looking now, we might be at the same spot where we can't guarantee that we're gonna be able to give it back. So, I mean, there's no easy answer for that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, logistically, it would probably be easier to take the across-the-board cut because people would still get their holiday pay and they wouldn't have furlough days to work in that way. I don't know that employees have a sense of, I mean, I had 3 emails from different employees who said they'd rather take an across-the-board cut rather than take furlough days. But, I mean, generally speaking, I don't know what the other 545.
Of the dozen or so I talked to, it was 50-50. And they were adamantly in their 50%.
And I got more furlough days because they said they could get out and get them a part-time job to compensate the money. And these people that make, time you take the insurance and everything out of the $34,000, you're really knocking them down with salary.
It's not.
So,
Another suggestion that was made was taking those eligible for furlough and increasing the threshold. Right now, you have to be here 10 years to be eligible for furloughs. push that up to 15, I'm sorry, longevity, I'm sorry. 15, 10 years for longevity, push that up 5 years. Wendy worked up the estimated cost savings on that. That is within $20,000 of 50% of current furlough levels. So if you chose the option on the spreadsheet with the 50% furlough level, the savings, I believe, is around $20,000 difference. It's $20,000 lower to go with that recalculation based on 15, 20, and 25 years rather than 10, 15, and 20. But then you run the risk of somebody getting it last year for the first time, as someone put it to me before the meeting, and cutting it out this year. So there's just,
Well, whoever sent me the email about the policy about when longevity pay was initially given, it said that longevity pay will be given every year if the board could afford it.
that is correct.
And it's obvious that the board has not been able to afford it for a few years, but we've still been paying it. So from where I'm sitting, that's a bonus. I mean, and I don't think that people, don't get me wrong, I think that people should be allowed to get a bonus, but I think it should be based on performance, attendance and all that good stuff that you're supposed to see on evaluation. And I think that at this point, if we're even considering, even the minutest millage increase, that we should not be paying a bonus. So,
that leads us, can I get a consensus vote on any percentage of longevity?
Raymond?
If we take it across the board cut and longevity, we're hurting the employees that have been here the longest, the most. Unless we take, and that 2.5% or whatever percent we take, the longevity is left alone, then fine. Otherwise, I'll stay with 50% of longevity over none.
Okay, Rita?
Okay. I hate the idea of not paying any longevity, but I understand what's at stake here. But I'm gonna say minimum 50%.
Chipper?
50%.
Bart?
If we can stop from taking furlough days from them, I'd rather do away with the longevity. I think we ought to look at maybe changing longevity to 50% of the amount we pay in now in the future. But, I don't see how we gonna be able to give furlough days and then turn back around and then you maybe talk about a tax increase. Taxpayers not gonna be happy with this thing you talk about, a bonus, and that's what longevity amounts to be. It's just a bonus in pay.